Back to the Future it's a human story. I mean, there's lots of movies say, well, it's a science fiction movie. Well, yeah, there's science fiction in it, but it's not a movie about technology. It's a movie about this family. And movies about families always resonate. It's also a movie that captures a moment that every human being experiences, which is the realization, oh my God, my parents were once children. Back to the Future captures all that.
Today, man is successfully probing deep into the mysteries of the universe. Can he penetrate the greatest mystery of all, time itself?
I grew up reading all these time travel stories. When I was from grade school, when I saw the George Pal version of the Time Machine, H.G. Wells' Time Machine, I was fascinated by time travel, and I read all these great time travel stories and novels through college. What's kind of neat about these movies, though, is that, most people, as crazy as they are, they still make sense and people can figure them out. And there's 11-year-old kids that understand time travel because, Doc does that chalkboard thing in part 2 and they get it.
It's interesting to me because there's so many future-based films, but the one that stands most vivid in people's minds, it always goes to Back to the Future #2, and it was the most realistic.
Our attitude about the future was, the future should be great, but the McFly family should still be screwed up. We wanted people to see our future and say, cool, I want to live in that future. You see a lot of these movies that take place in the future, and it looks like they tore everything down. Everything is gone, and they have this Tomorrowland, all these things, you can't connect with it because it doesn't look like anything things look like today. The storefronts, the movie theater is still a movie theater that's showing Jaws 19 holograph 3D. We didn't expect that 3D movies would be as big a deal as they are today, but how about that? We knew we weren't going to have flying cars. We promised flying cars, so we had to show them. But yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that we kind of thought of was based in reality. We knew that flat screen TVs were on the horizon. Home video conferencing was something that had been talked about for a long time. We figured, okay, that's very likely. Today you could do that,
When you wrote and created the first Back to the Future, was there consideration for part 2 and part 3, and how did those all come together?
No, we had no idea that there was ever going to be a sequel. As Bob Zemeckis often says, if we knew we were going to do a sequel, we would have never had Jennifer be in the car with him at the very end of the first movie. Because when it came time for us to write the second one and figure out what are we going to do, what are we going to do with Jennifer? She's not a very well-developed character, and the story's not about her, and we actually ended up having to have her unconscious for most of Back to the Future 2.
Are there any plot holes, anything that trips you up, that really irks you, that you wish you guys had?
Well, look, the fact is that there are not. There's real logic and there's movie logic. And if you create movie logic and you stick with it, people will buy it, even if it doesn't really make that much sense. The best example of that is the disappearing photo gag. It's a great device because it visually tells you how much time Marty has left before he starts to fade out from existence.
That's George McFly?
But if you start thinking about it, it begs the question, well, how come the physical photograph itself isn't disintegrating? And if Marty starts to fade out when he's playing Johnny Be Good, who would have been there to take the picture if it's just an empty frame, right? So, if you really think about this stuff, it makes absolutely no sense at all. But we know that you don't think about that, and it's not played that way, so it works. Does it bother me that people don't give part 3 the respect that I think it deserves? Of course it does. Part 3, to me, is just this, wonderfully romantic classic adventure story. Having grown up on Westerns, both Bob and I grew up on Westerns, the idea that we could take Back to the Future and go into the West. I think the problem is that a lot of people don't appreciate Westerns anymore. But it's great. It's great.
Have you ever considered what it would be if you guys did a fourth? If you would, what time period you would travel to, or what would happen with it?
No, we never did. We fantasized. There were things that we talked about when we were developing the sequels, as where else would they go back in time to. Well, one of the ideas that we actually wrote was that Marty goes back, ends up in 1967 and endangers his own existence again by interfering with George and Lorraine's second honeymoon at which he was conceived. That was something that we actually, we got to the script stage and then we just kind of said, well, you know, we kind of already did this movie, let's not do that one again. And another thing that we kicked around that would have been pretty funny actually was to go back to the 1920s and meet Doc Brown's mother. We would have had Christopher Lloyd play his mom. That would have been pretty funny. We are always excited to partner with companies that come up with some, you know, really fresh, creative, exciting new ways to look at our franchise, to look at our property, and that's what's cool for me, because what's been neat about Back to the Future, and again, here we are 30 years later, that kids that grew up watching Back to the Future, they're now like you. They're running companies. They're saying, I love Back to the Future. I want to do something involving Back to the Future. And we get this new perspective on our trilogy from people that grew up with it. And you guys come up with stuff that I would have never thought of, that, you know, none of us back in the day would have thought of. But it's exciting and it's great and it's still true to what we envision and it's fun and I just love it.
Hi, I'm Alina here at the Hundreds Home Base. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Hundreds YouTube channel for more exclusive videos below, and check out thehundreds.com for the latest and greatest in street culture from around the world.